Great. Thank you, Emily. And if you want to ensure that you are not recorded, you're welcome to turn off your camera. Usually the recording just catches the speaker in the slides. But welcome everybody to our fall community engagement conversation. We'll be talking about designing a community engagement strategy today, and I will be your facilitator. My name is Sasha Parodi, and I work at MAPC on the community engagement team, and I use she, her pronouns. If you need any tech support, please message Emily, who is on here managing our tech today, and they can get you set up with that. We also have several of our MAPC team on here, so they'll be kind of responding in the chat if you have any questions. So just before we dive into the content of today, we just wanted to start with ground setting with a few goals for our time together today. We're hoping that by the end of this hour, you all have an understanding of our community engagement process, that you've had a chance to reflect on your own community engagement practice and identify one community engagement strategy that you want to incorporate or strengthen into your practice. We really want this to be a bi-directional and conversational space. So while we will be sharing what we do here at MAPC, we really want to hear from you all as well, and we'll have some time for small group conversations to really get at that. So this is just briefly what our time together will look like for this next hour. We're going to start with some brief overview, and then we will split into pairs to share why do you do community engagement in your work, just to get to know each other a little bit better and understand each other's why. I will then go ahead and share how we do community engagement at MAPC. We'll dive a little bit deeper into our process. If you've attended prior community engagement conversations, this will probably sound familiar. We're mostly hoping that we'll have time for Q&A so that we can dig a little bit more deeply into the questions that you all have. And then we will spend the second half hour really talking about your own community engagement practices and the ways that you might want to apply this strategy or practices that your peers on this call use in their work to your work. And then we will close with some next steps. So just some brief context for the community engagement conversations. These started in the last MAPC fiscal year, which ran from July 2024 to June 2025. And in that time, we had 8 virtual sessions and 1 in-person gathering that were really focused on creating a space for participants to share barriers that they face around community engagement and develop a group understanding of community engagement strategies, principles, and frameworks. We also wanted to introduce folks to our team and how we do our work across the region, ways that we can support our work, but also strengthen the network of community engagement practitioners so that we can support each other's work. After this first year, we got a lot of great feedback from folks, most of which was focused on really diving in deeper to some of the content that we shared and really focusing on building skill sets that folks can use to practice and implement in their community engagement work. And so that's what we're hoping to do today and with the other 3 sessions that we'll have in this fiscal year. So we'll have 3 virtual sessions, this being the first of those 3, and then 1 in-person gathering, all focused more on strengthening our practice now that we have the foundation from FY25. And if you'd like to watch any of the sessions from last year, you can access that on our community engagement conversations page, which we can share a link to after the session. So the things we're going to talk about this year in our 3 virtual sessions are starting with designing a community engagement strategy, which is our focus for today. In February, we will join with each other to talk about language access and how to plan for language access. And then in April, we'll talk about evaluating our community engagement methods and thinking about how do we know when we're doing well with our engagement. So that's what's to come. And before we dive into our content, we really want to give a chance for you all to connect with each other and talk about why you do community engagement in your work. So we're going to open some breakout rooms and just give you a few minutes to chat with each other, and then we will come back to the main room. So I will stop sharing my screen. And I think we should have the rooms open in a second. Okay. I'm going to pause.
I think I accidentally kicked myself out of the breakout room.
That's just par for the course on Zoom. That's all good.
Yeah,
We're about to move into the next part. So
gotcha.
welcome back. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. I apologize if you were abruptly pulled from your breakout, but hopefully you got a chance to connect with somebody in the room, and we'll have some time down the road for some further conversation. But we just wanted to start by sharing a little bit about MAPC's community engagement process. So the community engagement team at MAPC really, we value starting our uh, engagement work, whether we're supporting our colleagues on a project or we're doing a community engagement focused project ourselves, by really looking at the purpose of the engagement. What are we trying to do with people? Are we trying to just build a relationship with them? Are we trying to inform them of something that's happening in their community? Are we collecting information from them? Are we trying to support them in collective decision making? And what would success look like if we were to do this well? And that really helps ground us in why we're doing what we're doing and how we might want to approach it. That purpose leads us into what we have been calling a landscape analysis, which is really just understanding the ecosystem that we're working in. Who are we trying to reach? What are the priority groups? What are their social networks, community characteristics? What's the history of the space that we're in? What dynamics should we be aware of? And what are the best ways for us to reach and build relationships with people? This landscape analysis, is really crucial to doing the rest of our work well. It is a lot of investment up front, but what we found is that when we do this well, the rest of our engagement goes much more smoothly because we're designing engagement that is responsive to what we know about the people we're trying to build relationships with. And so that landscape analysis and purpose really informs our messaging and materials, as well as the methods and activities that we might be using. The reason we're bringing purpose in here as well is that, if we're just informing people about something, there's no opportunity for them to provide input. That might really change how we're conducting engagement versus if we're trying to help facilitate a decision-making process, right? So it's really important for us from a transparent relationship building place to understand what the constraints of our own project are, and where people are really going to have an opportunity to participate in the process that we're trying to do with them. And also understanding who we're working with will really help us design messaging and materials or methods and activities that are responsive to how they engage with the world. Because we often see materials being used for engagement or outreach that really don't resonate for people because they're not accounting for people's day-to-day realities. And so we want to make sure that we're doing that and meeting people where they are. After the activities that we do, the building of relationship, we want to be consistently analyzing what we're hearing from people and thinking about how we're including what we're hearing into the work that we're doing. So if we are collecting information from folks about changes they want to see in their community, how are we putting that into the deliverable of the project that we're working on? Who are we sharing that information with in the city or town that we're working with to make sure that folks are aware of challenges or priorities being raised by their constituents? So thinking not just about how we're doing engagement, but what happens after? Where is that information going? And how are we making sure that we're acting on that information, even if we ourselves are not going to be able to respond directly to every ask that community members have? In the middle, we have evaluation and enhancing the network and this nifty little loop of arrows. Because across all of this, we try to approach our work with an evaluation and relationship building lens. So we're constantly at every stage of our process thinking about how we're doing what we're doing, what could be improved, what needs to be adapted. And also we're thinking about who we've connected to and who else we need to connect with. We want to make sure, especially as an entity that often is jumping into work with communities, we might not be staying in a community for a very long time. We want to make sure that when a project is done, when we're finished with our work, that the folks we've engaged are connected to each other and to our municipal partners rather than only being connected to us. So that's a lot of that enhancing the network, making sure that as we're building relationships with people, we're supporting them building relationships with each other so that any of the work that continues from this effort can be done in continued relationship and collaboration. I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but we wanted to really show you kind of a zoomed out version of how we think about our work in a project process. I would also say that for any individual engagement that we do, we're kind of cycling through this. What is the purpose of an individual event that we might be hosting? Who are we trying to reach through that event? What is going to be effective messaging or materials for that event and for the people we're trying to engage with? What activities can we include in it? And then after the event, what did we hear? Where is that information going? How did that event go? And what do we need to improve for future events? And who did we connect with at this event? And who else do we need to connect them to? So this both works on a micro level of day-to-day events or engagements, as well as on that macro process level. I think I'm hearing an echo. Can folks make sure that they're muted if they aren't already? Thank you. Okay. So with this, we break our goals into what, who, and how goals, which I spoke to a little bit in this process, but really thinking about what do we need input on from community members, and especially where are we looking, what information are we looking for that we can't get in other sources? Who do we need to be reaching, and in particular, reaching people who have historically been marginalized or harmed by governance and public process, and how do we reach them in a way that is effective, that is reciprocal with them, and what values will be guiding our work in that process. So this is a lot of what informs that initial purpose as well as landscape analysis phase of the process, so that we can do our work and grounded in these goals. That purpose and these goals then bring us into the landscape analysis, where each engagement method should have a clear purpose connected to the goals, and where the engagement is really designed to meet the communities where they are. As noted here, this is really an iterative process. So while we start our projects with a purpose of engagement and a landscape analysis, we might need to pivot midway through a project based on information that we learned. And that's okay, that's a normal part of the process. And so we try to build that in from the outset, the expectation that this is an iterative, emergent practice, and we might need to adapt based on what we're hearing from community members. So these are, we wanted to share a couple of examples where that adaptation happened in real time. So one of our projects in the last couple of years was working on a housing production plan in the city of Everett. And the original project was scoped to have community-wide engagement sessions, something like a public meeting or a public hearing. To do awareness building. And the project really had a priority of reaching renters, low-income households, and immigrant groups. What we discovered through that process, really from the feedback that we heard from people, was that to really implement a strong community engagement strategy, we needed to partner with community-based organizations and housing experts to reach people where they are. And through that process, we, rather than having events where people had to come to us and had to engage in technical jargon, we ended up doing a community engagement roadshow where we really met people where they were already going at the Halloween fair, at a high school football game. I think there was a community baby shower that MAPC folks attended to talk to folks about housing. So this is a good example where the original scope of the project really had a more traditional engagement approach, but based on what we were hearing, we felt that it was important to go a little bit of a different route to be effective in spreading the word about this housing production plan and in getting the input that we were looking to get through this project. A similar example of this is working on a project in the town of Milton, where there was a parcel of land that was up for potential community uses. And we were tasked with getting an understanding of what the neighboring community to that parcel of land wanted to see from that building. We had originally scoped this project to have several focus groups or small group activity events where folks could come and share what they wanted to see for this building. But we were finding that we were engaging the same people over and over again. We weren't really getting newer folks who had not engaged with this process at all. And more importantly, we weren't getting people who actually lived in the neighboring housing next to this building, which was a target community that we wanted to reach. And so we pivoted our process to do door knocking. And we actually walked through the neighborhood that we were trying to reach and just knocked on some doors and talked to people. And this really helped us meet people, again, where they are and in a format that worked for them. We didn't talk to everyone, but we were able to have some very valuable conversations. And through this process, we actually ended up learning about an additional community asset that we hadn't known about at all, which was a food pantry in the community. And so one of the recommendations that came out of this door knocking event was to have this community building be used for the food pantry, which is not something we would have been able to include in our recommendations if we hadn't done the door knocking. So it brought us to new relationships, new community partners, but also helped strengthen the recommendations we were making to the town. So this is just a little bit more about the outcomes I've already spoken to, where we, at the start of the project for the Everett Housing Production Plan, we were told that we would have a tough time with engagement, that folks don't engage in public process. But by doing this engagement roadshow, by really working through partners and relationships with community-based organizations, we were able to reach over 300 residents in our priority groups. And similarly in Milton, we were tasked with engaging a community who had historically been excluded from public process. So we knew that we needed to reach them where they were, and they weren't coming on their own to events that we were hosting. So by pivoting our engagement, we were able to reach over 200 people in the priority groups that we were trying to reach. And that both happened through door knocking and through other dynamic engagement methods like working with community partners, joining meetings in the community that were already happening, and doing a survey that folks were able to interact with if they didn't have a chance to engage with us in person. So I'm going to pause here and stop sharing my screen and just see before we move into the next part of our time together if folks have any questions about this. Yeah, Brandy.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much for sharing. I love both of these examples, and I think they are just like really great examples of ways to adapt and deepen community engagement. So it's very exciting to see you all talk about that in a planning context. And I think I have I'll start with just one question. Did in the municipalities where you were working, did seeing the MAPC community engagement team do work in this way begin to kind of shift perspectives for folks who are sort of regular, staff at the municipality around what community engagement could look like, what it actually takes to reach hard to reach residents? I'm curious, like if there was any dialogue around that in these two municipalities.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering, Gloria, if you wanted to share a little bit more about Everett, because Gloria was really the mastermind behind the Everett strategy. So I'll pass it to Gloria if you have anything to share about that project specifically.
Sure. Thanks, Sasha, and thanks, Brandy, for the question. I would say the answer ultimately goes back to that closing the loop or enhancing the network, rather, piece of our community engagement strategy process that Sasha presented at the start of our session, where throughout our engagement processes, we are trying to bring our municipal partners in with us to go and do the on-the-ground engagement so that they are then able to hold those relationships with the community organizations we're partnering with the community leaders, community members, once we as MAPC have completed the project with that municipality. So I think the hope is that by doing the work together in this really relational way, we're showing a different way to do engagement that our municipal staff can adopt into their practices themselves. Really exactly to your point, Brandy.
Yeah, and I would add for the Milton project, we actually door knocked with uh, volunteers from the town who were interested in this parcel of land and had supported the original proposal for a project to be done, to kind of hear from community members what they wanted for that building. And so they actually came out with us and door knocked, which was both helpful for us to cover more ground, and also to have familiar faces, folks who could say, I live in this community, I'm your neighbor. But also they hadn't thought about door knocking before. And so even though they had done a lot of community building to get to the point of even proposing to the town that they hire an external consultant like MAPC to do this project, they engaged with people they had never met before, who were literally their neighbors. And so I do think that created some connection points, and hopefully planted some seeds for further ideas. We've also seen this in other projects where, we've tried a thing with partners and then that kind of sparked further ideas down the road. We've seen this with a lot of our language access work where we started working with cities and towns and they had no idea what they wanted to do or where they could try something, and then by trying one thing maybe with us, they then kind of were able to snowball that into further work. We'll go to Abby and then Anna, and thank you for your question, Brandy.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I'm trying to lower my hand. Okay. I wanted to follow up on the question about the door knocking and the being present at so many events in the community, and also the partnering with the local volunteers and potentially the local planning board and staff. How typical is that for MAPC? Are there times that you just work on your own as a team and it's not appropriate to be working with volunteers? Can you talk a little bit about that? And then also just in general, how much conversation is there with the kind of the local team in the municipality about when it's time to potentially pivot or look at different ways to do the outreach and different data to gather?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Abby. It's something we're still grappling with. Every project is a little bit different. I think where we've seen things work really well is when we try to set expectations from the get-go. And I would almost frame it as we almost have like an internal engagement process that we go through with our partners to understand how we're going to be able to do engagement on a project. So thinking about, who are the partners we're working with? What is their positionality? And what are they looking to get out of this process? What does the budget look like? And how much leeway do we have? But I think ideally at the outset, we try to come in with a pretty broad scope for engagement so that we can get more specific after we've done that initial landscape analysis and relationship building. And on projects where we've been able to do that, that's worked really well because we're able to come back to our partner and say, this is what we're hearing. Based on what we're hearing and what the data shows, this is what we suggest we do in terms of our engagement activities. We certainly have projects where we are brought in and there is already a pre-existing scope or there are pre-existing engagements that we are expected to do. And I think our strategy in those moments is either how can we supplement that engagement with other activities that will get folks who may not attend a big public meeting, for example, or how do we pivot that public meeting, if that's what's scoped, or whatever engagement is scoped, to be as accessible and dynamic as possible? Okay, we have to have this big event. Are there requirements for what that event is? Or can we play with the format? Can we play with the activities in the event? So kind of trying to use our constraints and think creatively within them. I would say to your other question about how often we work with partners, because of how we are positioned as an agency where we work with 101 communities and we're often not embedded in a community that we're working with, we really try to prioritize working with partners because we don't have the capacity or the relationships to be doing completely on the ground grassroots engagement. So often where we're positioned is trying to build those networks with community leaders, groups, organizations that are convening community members themselves. So kind of in that grass mids level. But the hope is that we're supporting our municipal partners in having those relationships so that they can be more present in the day-to-day community spaces that they're hoping to connect with and build relationships with, and doing that in a way that's reciprocal and not extractive, which is hard because often we're budget constrained. Often we're coming to communities and saying, we need your input on this thing right now. But we're trying to think about it a little bit more of how do we exist in relationship with people in a way that's reciprocal, where they feel like they can come to their city or town and they feel like they have opportunity to provide input where it's important to.
Do you tend to work closely with planning boards in the local municipalities?
It depends on the projects. I would say planning boards I know are a big hurdle for a lot of our cities and towns, or they're an added dynamic that we have to think about. We typically work with planning staff or municipal staff. And we're not always engaged on the project to the point where the planning board is, approving a plan that is produced by MAPC in partnership with the city or town. Sometimes we are. I would say that often projects are successful when planning board members are eager and engaged and supportive of the work. And I think when they have questions, it's really important to make sure that we are treating them as a important player in the ecosystem of that project, and making sure that we're engaging with them, answering their questions, so that hopefully we can build trust and relationship with them through the project so that it can move forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. We'll go to you, Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna. I direct the Alston Brighton Health Collaborative, and I'm curious about door knocking. The door knocking strategy landscape has probably gotten a lot harder.
Yes.
So how have you adapted to that? Sometimes in very real time, and maybe what are your metrics for success, knowing that sometimes literally going onto somebody's porch is it's just a very different landscape that we're living in. So how are you thinking about that in terms of times of day, days of week, who's doing it, what's the message, what's the approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely something we thought about here. We made sure that we always were in pairs. This project, we ended up in mixed gendered pairs, which I think worked well. I don't know that has to be what you do, but I felt like, personally as a woman, I felt like that was helpful for me. We used our best judgment. If a home had a lot of signs about people not trespassing or coming in or soliciting, we didn't knock on that door. Maybe we'd leave a flyer. If folks didn't answer, even if we could hear them in the house, we didn't keep knocking. We left. So we weren't, the goal was not to force anybody into talking to us. We also wore t-shirts. MAPC's colors are various shades of green. And so we had bright green t-shirts with our logo on it. So hopefully, we had a pretty friendly demeanor, and we also weren't asking anybody for any money or like elections related things. So I think the elevator pitch that you use is really helpful. In our case, we were lucky that we were talking about like a building down the road. So we were able to start by saying like, hi, do you know the building on the corner of your street? What do you think about that building? And kind of get folks to engage with us that way. We knocked on about 100 doors and spoke with 29 people, which I think for door knocking is actually a pretty high return on investment rate. And that took us about 4 or 5 hours with one day. We went one day on a Tuesday evening, like after work hours, but not too late. And this was in the summer, so the sun was still out. And then we did a Saturday, and that during the day, and that worked very well. So I would say definitely go in pairs, have a really clear elevator pitch. And if somebody is not comfortable, no, that's fine. You do not have to engage with them. We also had like a flyer with a photo of the building that like we held up, and so folks could like visually see what we were asking about pretty quickly, and that worked very well. Yeah. I'm going to move us into small group conversations, but I just wanted to see if there were any final questions before we did that. Okay, I know there was a question here about who brings MAPC into these spaces, and I just wanted to address that. It really depends on the who's submitting that request and what their positionality is. Sometimes a city or town will hire us for a project. MAPC also runs a technical assistance program in which cities or towns can apply for technical assistance dollars that will provide MAPC staff to work on a project. And so sometimes that is how we end up working with the city or town on a project. So it really depends on the funding source and whether we MAPC are initiating it or whether city or town is initiating it. There are some other examples, but just wanted to address that. So now we're going to go into small group conversations. And the invitation is for you to take 2 minutes to think about a moment, take a moment to identify an upcoming initiative or area of work where you might be doing community engagement. and think about how you can apply some of the things that we talked about here to your project process. And then we'll use the remaining time to discuss with your small group what that engagement is and what you're hoping to apply. So we'll take about 15 minutes for that, and then we'll come back to the main space to close out our time together. So with that, Emily, are we ready to open our breakout rooms?
Yes, in 1 minute, 1 second. All right. Yeah, I think we're all set. I'm going to open the rooms now.
Great, thank you. Hey. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had some time to share. If folks didn't get a chance to, really encourage you to share in the chat. We would still love to hear what you're thinking about, what you're working towards. Definitely heard some great things from folks in my group. One thing that I think I maybe shared a little bit, but just want to really emphasize just coming out of my group is, I think that transparency is a really important element of community engagement work, and something that frankly I think we struggle to do often in government because we're afraid that that might jeopardize things. But I think that the more that we can be honest with people about our constraints, the more likely we are to build trust with them. I think 9 times out of 10, people are reasonable. And if you tell them, I really appreciate what you're sharing. I appreciate, thank you so much for sharing your experience with me. I actually can't do anything, but I can connect you to the person who might be able to, or I can't do anything in this context, but maybe let's think about how we could address this in another context. I can't offer this to you, but could we do this smaller thing that helps us move towards that direction? I think 9 times out of 10, people appreciate that you're trying, and they want to feel heard and want to feel like somebody is going to be responsive to them. And I think where we get into problems is when we say thank you for that information and then we never come back to them, and then they're like, well, I just shared all of this stuff with you and you didn't do anything about it, so why am I going to share again? Or what's the point of me engaging in this? So just really want to emphasize, we have all these tools, we have all these processes, but at the end of the day, it's a relationship, and how you show up with that person is probably going to be the biggest determinant of what happens down the road. And so I think the more that we can be honest and upfront with people and navigate that conversation with care, the more likely it is that we are going to get somewhere with them together rather than creating further division. So just wanted to kind of wrap on that note. We just have a few closing items for you all. We would really love to hear what you're taking away from the session. So feel free to drop in the chat something that you're walking away with. And actually, I am going to share my screen for a survey that we would love for folks to take. If I can figure out how to share it. Okay, for some reason my computer, oh, yep, okay, sorry. So in the top of the screen here, there's a web, join by web option. If you type in pollev.com/MAPC poll, or if you scan this little QR code over here, and maybe I can make it bigger. There we go. We would love feedback on this session. This session was built off of feedback from the previous year. So we'd really love to hear from you all. What worked for you? What do you want more of? And we will try to incorporate that into our future sessions. So I will leave this up on the screen for the next few minutes. Our next session will be in February, focused on language access. We will share more information. If you registered for today's event, you should get information for the next session. And we're also happy to chat with you in the meantime. You can always reach out to us either by emailing us individually or emailing communityengagement@mapc.org. And we'll share that information with you in the follow-up email as well. But we really love talking about this. Engagement is what we're doing every day. And so we'd love to hear from you and connect with you, and happy to share what we're working on. But we also really appreciate hearing what folks are thinking through, because it's really a continuous learning process and we're all on this journey together. But with that, thank you so much for folks who are taking the survey. We really appreciate it. I will leave the slide up. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We're really thankful to have been in space with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll just leave this up for a couple more minutes.